Welcome to the infamous edition of the Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation done through creative storytelling of history's most infamous people. Now, let's meet our guest. Welcome to the podcast. Let's start at the absolute beginning, where the public narrative hasn't yet distorted who you were. When and where were you born, and what was your given name?
I was born Dean Arnold Corll on December 24th, 1939, in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
What was your hometown and home life like as a child?
My early years were spent in Indiana before my family packed up and moved down south to Houston, Texas, when I was about 11 years old. Home life was pretty unstable, honestly. My parents, Arnold and Mary, had a volatile relationship. They divorced when I was 6, got back together for a little bit when we moved to Texas, and then split up for good just a few years later. My father was incredibly strict and demanding, while my mother swung to the complete opposite side. She was intensely overprotective of me.
Was there a story behind your name or a nickname that stuck with you?
People in the neighborhood eventually started calling me the Candy Man. It sounded sweet, and at the time it felt completely natural. My mother and I actually owned and operated a candy manufacturing business called Pecan Prince in the Houston Heights area. I spent years working right there in the factory making the sweets.
What were you like as a child, and how many years of schooling did you actually attend?
On the outside, I was a very polite, quiet, and reliable boy. I attended school steadily through my teenage years and graduated from Vidor High School in 1958. I was the kind of person who stayed out of trouble, kept to myself, and did what was expected of him mechanically.
What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
In 1964, I was drafted into the United States Army. It felt like a standard obligation that every young man faced back then, but it completely changed my internal world. Being in that environment made me confront parts of my personal identity that I had kept buried, particularly regarding my sexuality. I was ultimately released a year later on a hardship discharge so I could return home to Houston and help my mother with the family candy business.
At what moment did you realize your name would never be forgotten?
That wouldn't happen until August of 1973, in the absolute worst way possible. The public discovered what had been happening in Houston and Pasadena over the previous 3 years. When the police were directed to a rented boat storage unit I kept, the news completely shook the entire nation. The media quickly labeled the discovery as the Houston mass murders, and suddenly, the quiet electrician from the Heights was being broadcasted as one of the most prolific serial killers in American history.
Who do you believe betrayed you first? A person, society, or your own instincts?
I was betrayed by the very teenagers I recruited to help me. I had drawn 2 local boys, David Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley, into my circle. I paid them cash, anywhere from $10 to $200, to help me bring other boys to my addresses. I trusted them completely to keep the secret, but in the end, it was Wayne Henley who turned on me in a split second during a gathering at my bungalow.
What was your most unique habit or a random fact about you that would surprise people?
Because of the family candy factory, I used to constantly hand out free candy to the neighborhood kids. I was always smiling, friendly, and approachable. The local boys thought of me as a nice guy who would let them hang out at the shop or give them a lift to a party. They had absolutely no idea that the friendly candy man giving them sweets was using that exact persona to mask something incredibly dark.
Did you have any known rivalries that defined your career?
My defining conflict wasn't with a rival, but with the changing expectations of the teenagers I controlled. As time went on, the dynamic between myself and my young accomplices became increasingly tense. I was demanding total control, while they were dealing with their own internal horrors about what they were witnessing and participating in. That escalating friction inside my own house is what ultimately brought everything to a screeching halt.
What personal battles were you fighting privately while the world was watching?
After I turned 30 in 1969, I went through a massive, severe personality shift that nobody around me could quite explain. Privately, I was working as a standard electrician for Houston Lighting and Power, presenting a perfectly normal blue-collar face to the community. But behind closed doors, I was fighting a deeply disturbing urge for complete possession and control over others, designing elaborate restraints and keeping a hidden toolbox of horrors while acting like a regular neighbor during the day.
When the law finally closed in, how exactly were you brought to justice? Walk me through the final arrest, the charges that ultimately stuck, and the legal outcome of your trials.
I never actually faced a courtroom or a judge. On the morning of August 8th, 1973, during a confrontation at my home, Wayne Henley managed to pick up my .22 caliber pistol. He shot me multiple times in the chest, back, and lungs, ending my life right there. Immediately afterward, Henley called the police and confessed to everything, leading the investigators directly to the boat shed where 18 victims were buried in the dirt. Because I died that morning, my legal record simply reads, unattributable due to death, while my teenage accomplices were the ones who went to trial and received consecutive life sentences.
What is the biggest misconception people have about your life?
People look at the gruesome tally of at least 28 victims and assume I must have looked or acted like an obvious monster. The reality is much more terrifying. The public never suspected a thing because I was an ordinary, helpful man who worked a steady job, ran a business with his mother, and was well liked by the families in the area. The system failed to see me because I looked exactly like the rest of society.
When, where, and how did you pass away?
I passed away on August 8, 1973, in Pasadena, Texas. My cause of death was officially ruled as exsanguination, bleeding to death, from the gunshot wounds inflicted by Henley. I was 33 years old.
Calvin, do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories they shared that they would like to share with the listeners before signing off?
I would just tell the listeners that the most dangerous individuals are often the ones who smile the brightest and hand out the candy. History remembers the horror, but it started with an ordinary man that a whole neighborhood trusted. Thank you for having me.
And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, do better with the life you have been given and choose to do good in this life. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.